In the last episode, Lance was killed by an arrow from Carol, and the big governor died in the middle of nowhere. Now Daryl and Carol are going to rescue their friend, because according to Lance, the Commonwealth is now in possession of a train. The companions were supposed to have been taken away and sent to an unknown place to work as laborers on the railway. Their suspicions prove correct when, tonight, a convoy departs from the Commonwealth. Within the white camper, Ezekiel, Negan, and others have been blindfolded. Periodically, soldiers inject them with a substance, inducing a deep sleep, leaving them unaware of their destination. In the last truck, due to the rough terrain, a bag falls off a person's head, revealing Maggie. Upon waking, she surveys her surroundings and notices the soldier guarding her is asleep. She recalled what happened before she was knocked out. They were supposed to leave the Commonwealth together during the day, but suddenly they were attacked, and Herschel was taken. Maggie tried to calm down. Her son was still waiting for her to rescue him. Now she had to get out while the soldiers slept. Regular efforts to loosen the ropes proved futile, requiring a sudden burst of strength to break free. After breaking free from the rope, Maggie looked at her unconscious companion, but she didn't know who it was. Taking off the headgear, she saw that it was Gabriel. Maggie whispered to wake up Gabriel, and then she pointed to the sleeping soldier and told Gabriel to keep quiet. With Maggie's assistance, Gabriel frees himself from the bonds. Following this, Gabriel walked to the other side to help Rosita break free. They planned to sneak away quietly, as engaging in a fight would surely alert the convoy ahead. Rosita was the first to leap off the vehicle, followed closely by Gabriel. Maggie finally poked her head out, feeling the rush of speed. Just as Maggie was staring, the car lurched and the soldier woke up. When he saw the people running away, the soldier was about to shoot them. Luckily, Maggie reacted quickly and the driver was shot dead before he knew what was happening. The vehicle lost control, crashing into a large tree and coming to a halt. 3 minutes later, Maggie emerged from the back, unharmed but feeling dazed from the impact to her head. The two men in the front were not so lucky. The soldier in the passenger side was thrown off the car and hung on a tree. Maggie cautiously approached the front of the vehicle. Upon seeing that the driver was already lifeless, she quickly climbed up with the intention of retrieving the weapons. Suddenly, the distant roar of engines echoed, indicating that the convoy ahead had realized there was an accident and was returning to investigate. Maggie, with no time to grab weapons, hastily headed into the woods, well aware that getting caught would lead to a grim fate. Early the next morning, Gabriel and Rosita, who jumped off first, were lying on the side of the road. Because the car was traveling too fast, they passed out at that time. Suddenly a dark figure approached Rosita. It was the soldier that Maggie had thrown out of the car, who had been killed by the fall and was now a zombie. Rosita backs away when she sees it, but Gabriel rushes over and pushes the zombie out of the way. They cooperated effortlessly to eliminate the soldier-turned-zombie. Afterward, they quickly took the soldier's walkie-talkie to eavesdrop on internal conversations. Coincidentally, the walkie-talkie buzzed, and a soldier was reporting to the commander. The gist was that they hadn't found Rosita and Gabriel at the accident site but had discovered some footprints, presumably Maggie's. They were planning to follow this lead. Rosita said that Maggie could be found at any moment, and they needed to hurry to help. On the other side, the convoy, after a night of travel, finally reached its destination. Ezekiel and the others, no longer injected, woke up one by one. They were anxious, unsure of what awaited them. Annie mentioned hearing about a car accident with the following vehicles. Negan, being astute, noted the absence of Gabriel, Rosita, and Maggie. They could be in the missing vehicle. Either they had successfully escaped, or their escape had failed, resulting in their deaths. Suddenly, a man walked to the doorway and said, "Welcome, this will be a new beginning. All you have to do is follow the rules, and you'll survive well." The man then divided the people in the car into two parts, and those who had been pointed out went down to wait first. Annie was among those selected. In the current situation, they had no choice but to comply. Negan reassured his wife, saying, "Don't worry, I'll find a way to get out of here and our family will be safe." Those who got off first were taken to another place for hard labor. Negan and the others stayed to build the railway track until it was finished before moving on to the next place. Meanwhile, in the Commonwealth, Pamela was holding a press conference. She walked up to Yumiko and said, "I'm glad you're here to help me prosecute Eugene. You better not play any tricks, or you'll never see your companions again, including your brother Tommy." Yumiko, furious, had no options. Afterward, Pamela returned to the stage, and the host immediately began the opening remarks. The gist was about Pamela's deep grief over losing her son and her determination to sue Eugene for his death. Their hushed conversation was also overheard by Yumiko. Yumiko, reluctantly, walked onto the stage. As Yumiko passes the soldiers, a report comes over their walkie-talkies that not only did they fail to catch Daryl and the others, but Rosita and the others got away. Even though the sound was low, Yumiko heard it. Yumiko stood in the middle of the stage. Originally, Pamela had prepared a scripted speech for her to follow. However, given that Daryl and the others were not captured, she was confident they could rescue everyone. Yumiko had faith in her companions. Moreover, Pamela would never know what kind of people she had angered. Yumiko said to the crowd, "It's an honor to be a lawyer for the Commonwealth. I was once a member of a community, and I've known Eugene for a long time. Eugene is a good person. Without him, I wouldn't be here or reunited with my brother." When Yumiko said that, Pamela and her supporters turned pale. However, the audience erupted into applause for Yumiko's fearless stance against tyranny. On the other side, Maggie wandered aimlessly through the woods, unaware of her location or the whereabouts of her companions. She was deeply worried about her son. As Maggie pondered, she heard a commotion behind her. When she turned around, she was surprised to find a child zombie walking towards her. It seems like the child zombie has recently turned. Maggie froze. As a mother, witnessing such a situation was unbearable because it reminded her of her son. Quickly, Maggie shook her head, firming her resolve. This wasn't the time for sentimentality. Zombies were always zombies. She picked up a stone from the ground, preparing to deal with the zombie. However, when she looked at this child, who was about the same age as Herschel, she couldn't bring herself to imagine the scene of taking action. In the end, Maggie dropped the stone and walked away decisively. The small zombie followed Maggie, trailing behind her like a child chasing after its mother. On the other side, Daryl and Carol hid near the train station, observing the situation below. The train Lance mentioned finally appeared. However, at this moment, a vehicle also arrived at the station with someone sitting on top. Connie. Daryl was visibly disturbed. She was someone he cared about. The person escorting Connie talked to the soldiers coming down from the train. Then, he took out a walkie-talkie to request approval from their leader. These people were going to send Connie away on the train, and it seemed like she was categorized as some kind of second-class individual. It was speculated that those deemed less of a threat would be sent to do labor. Those with combat abilities like Maggie, Rosita, and Connie probably had different destinations. Then the train took off for parts unknown, with Daryl and Carol following them in their car. Meanwhile, in the vicinity, Rosita heard the sound of the train. She was surprised. How could such a thing exist in the post-apocalyptic world? Rosita immediately ran towards the direction of the noise to investigate. Half an hour later, Daryl left the train behind and arrived early at the intersection of the railroad, making some preparations. Then the train will stop here and they can rescue Connie and press for the location of the others. On the other side, Maggie continued to wander aimlessly. She had no idea where she was and could only roam around, hoping to find Gabriel and the others. Suddenly, the sound of a motorcycle approached. Maggie quickly found a place to hide. It was a soldier from the Commonwealth. Coincidentally, he parked his vehicle at the intersection, just a step away from Maggie. He was a patrol soldier dispatched to check various intersections. However, he had not found any traces of escapees throughout his journey. As the soldier prepared to move on to inspect another area, he suddenly noticed a small zombie walking towards him. Maggie noticed a rusty iron nail on the ground. She picked it up, preparing herself. The man's attention was entirely on the approaching zombie. Intending to deal with it using his handgun, the soldier was seriously traumatized. He tried to pick up the pistol to fight back. Fortunately, Maggie managed to subdue him without incident. However, at this moment, the small zombie had reached Maggie. Maggie rolled the child over and held the child so that the child could not move. Maggie's heart was torn. As a mother, it was really hard for her to do it. After much hesitation, Maggie picked up the long nail from the ground. Maggie looks at this kid and it always reminds her of her son. After killing the small zombie, Maggie's mood worsened. What if something happened to Herschel? Would he end up like this too? Countless thoughts flooded Maggie's mind. Lost in her thoughts, she didn't even notice the approaching sound of a car. A jeep arrived. And luckily, it was Daryl and Carol. They had been waiting near the train tracks, and upon hearing gunshots, they rushed to check. To their surprise, it was Maggie. Witnessing the scene before them, they didn't say a word. They took Maggie back to the railroad intersection to continue waiting. Maggie's emotions remained low, and she blamed herself for not protecting Herschel. Carol tried to console her, saying that in the world before, They would never have known each other in this post-apocalyptic world. They became a family, and only they understood how strong they were. Pamela, that woman, wouldn't be able to tear them apart. She would pay for what she did, and they would find everyone. It was Gabriel and Rosita who heard the train and came this way just in time to see them. It was a relief that there were no casualties. Meanwhile, Daryl was interrogating a captured soldier. He brought the injured soldier back with him. Daryl peeled back Nelson's armor and looked at him. There was a bloody hole above the wound, indicating a serious injury. Despite being on opposite sides now, they were former colleagues. Daryl fell silent for a moment and then said, "I suggest you do something good with the little time you have left." He inquired about the destination of the train and mentioned that their friend was on that train. Daryl also asked about the meaning of the term second-class individuals. Nelson, coughing, remained silent. Betraying the Commonwealth would mean his family wouldn't survive. Carol and others entered, urging Daryl to prepare for the imminent arrival of the train. Growing impatient, Daryl drew his knife, preparing to use force on Nelson. At that moment, Gabriel looked at Nelson and said, "I know you. You come to the church every week, always sitting in the back. It seems like you have something you want to tell me." It turned out that Nelson had a family, and to ensure their well-being, he had done many undisclosed and shameful things for the Commonwealth. Guilt and shame haunted him, and today's outcome might be karma. As a priest, Gabriel comforted Nelson, advising him not to carry too much psychological burden and to persist in doing the right thing. God would see it. Nelson, speaking for the first time, said their friend was likely doing hard labor, specifically building railways for the Federation. He didn't know the exact location since they would immediately move to the next site after completing one. He was sent here when they escaped, so he doesn't know exactly where they are. Follow the train and you'll find your friends. Regarding second-class individuals, he had no idea what it meant, only that they were people Pamela hated the most, and they would be sent to extremely distant places from which they could never return. Daryl was anxious. He didn't want to lose Connie. When Nelson was done, he asked the priest to pray for him when he died. Gabriel didn't say no to Nelson. He sat down with him and Gabriel opened the Bible. After 10 minutes, Gabriel walked out holding a knife. They discussed their strategy together. They had tampered with the railroad tracks at the intersection, so when the train stopped, they could easily deal with the situation. 10 minutes later, the train arrived at the intersection where a soldier got off to switch the tracks. He took care of the zombie easily. The yellow item was a valve, and turning it over would change the tracks. However, when the soldier tried to turn it, he couldn't, no matter how hard he tried. It was clear something was wrong. He started inspecting and found some dried branches stuck in the tracks, signaling to the driver that there was an issue. The driver understood, but soon, the driver realized there was no signal, and attempts to call failed. This was part of Carol's plan to disable their communication systems. Then Maggie would take control of the driver and the rest of them would take out the soldiers. That way they could rescue Connie and still get the pilot to take them to their destination.